Without further ado, let the adventure begin.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Love that music, by the way. So we're in Nazareth now, and we're living in a cave. That's what they are, 25 caves that families lived in, small village. And we're packing up now because we know there's a census taking place in Bethlehem, and we have to get down there. And I'm Joseph, of course, and I have to take my wife Mary down there just for the fun of it here. And but we'll look for a caravan going because we don't go alone. It's dangerous to travel alone, and people traveled in caravans for safety and for supplies and everything else. It's just a much better way to go. And so we pack up and leave, and we've got to go down to the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee because that's where the journey begins. There's 3 routes we could take. One's through the mountains. We don't want to do that one, especially with Mary 9 months pregnant. And we don't want to go the long way along the Mediterranean. So we're going to go down where it's very pleasant. We're going to go down along the Jordan Valley. It's going to be 100 miles journey, and concerned about Mary, of course, because, Steve Ray here again. My wife, we've had 4 babies, and I know what it's like when my wife was 9 months pregnant. So they're going to go down along the Jordan Valley because there you have a constant source of water, the Jordan River. It's going to be warm because right now it's not like December in Michigan or something. We're traveling. It's going to be around 60 degrees when we leave Nazareth. When we get down in the Jordan Valley, especially close to the Dead Sea towards the end of the trip, it's going to be probably 90 degrees, believe it or not. Then we're going to head up into the mountains, and we're going to climb over 4,000 feet up, 20, 30 miles up into the mountains and arrive in Jerusalem. The average temperature in Jerusalem and Nazareth and Bethlehem this time is around 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's never going to be real cold. Then we're going to go up into the mountains of Jerusalem with the caravan. And that's a long trek. It's going up 4,000 feet from the lowest place on the face of the earth up to the highest. We might stop in Jerusalem and visit Zechariah and Elizabeth. Now, the ones, the relatives, and maybe stop there because they're right in Jerusalem. And then we might even stop and pray at the temple on the way past. Then another 4 miles we got to go, and we arrive at the entrance of Bethlehem. And I am quite convinced that when they arrived in Bethlehem, there was a donkey traffic jam. Donkeys everywhere, because this was a census. All the people that have David as their ancestor, who are from the city of Bethlehem, which is where David was born and where Ruth lived and Naomi, and so many things that happened there. So all of the people that was their hometown, doesn't mean they lived there, but that their ancestry came from there, had to go for a census and fill out the census. So there's probably a lot of people from the tribe of Judah there. Donkey traffic jam in the streets, trying to jockey around through the crowds. But before they arrive in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, if you remember last week, we talked about the tomb of Rachel that was at the entrance of Bethlehem. She was buried there 2,000 years earlier. That was their great-great-great-great-grandmother, as we talked about. And so obviously, I think Joseph at this moment is concerned and thinking, oh my goodness, my matriarch died here 9 months pregnant to giving birth, and I sure pray that God blesses us and that doesn't happen to us. When they arrive in Bethlehem, they try to find a place to stay. And they don't have Holiday Inns and Hiltons over there in those days. Joseph would have relatives, maybe not close relatives, but it was his ancestral hometown. So the presumption is there may have been relatives there. But because so many other people were arriving for the census, it's like when you have in a big city today, you have a conference or something, you can't find a hotel. You got to go 20 miles outside the city to get a hotel room. So they arrive and obviously no Wi-Fi to prepare a room ahead of time. So they have to try and find a place, and they can't. Now, did they ride on a donkey? We don't know that because, as we arrive now, is Mary on a donkey? Well, there's a document from the 2nd century that says she was on a donkey, but the Bible doesn't tell us anything about a donkey. But they were used for travel because they were not as expensive as a camel. And since there's no Mercedes buses or anything, Mary had 2 choices, really. She could walk that 100 miles, or she could ride a donkey or something like that. But donkeys are not easy to ride, and they're bony-backed evil creatures as far as I'm concerned. I've ridden on them many times in Israel. They always turn around and try to bite me in the leg, and they buck me off and all this. So they're just, you got to get used to riding those things. So they arrive, and the temperatures are probably around 50 to 60 degrees in Nazareth, and the sheep are out in the fields, by the way. And so Joseph finally finds a place for Mary to give birth. I think that was a big relief all of a sudden now to find a place. And we don't know exactly what it is. We know it's not a barn because he didn't have American-style barns back then. It was probably a cave because animals were kept in caves. And we know where that cave is because we're going to talk about that in a minute. We know where that cave is because there's a big church built over it and was built over it from the beginning. And so Joseph would find there's a manger in there. That gives us an indication that it was a place where animals were kept, probably sheep. So Joseph and Mary are there, and the baby is born. And the next week, we're going to talk about the angels that come and the shepherds and all the excitement. But now we have to stop, and we have to go forward 2,000 years. We got there with Mary presumably on a donkey with a traffic jam in Bethlehem. But now we've got to go back, and we're leaving our hotel in Jerusalem, and we're on our bus. And now we are on a Mercedes bus, and it's comfortable, and I have the microphone in my hand, and I'm talking to you about what we're going to experience when we go to Bethlehem. And on the bus, when I take my groups, I'm always telling them what it was like for Mary and Joseph, which we just did a little bit of. I mean, if we had an hour, I could go into a lot more detail. But as we're driving along, it kind of looks that the terrain maybe like California, middle California. It's nice territory, but there's some rocks. But over on the left, you see the Herodian. This is like on the shore of the horizon. It looks like a volcano, actually, a small volcano. It has the top off. And that was the fortress of King Herod the Great. In fact, he was buried there before the birth of Jesus. But that was one of his fortresses. And so we see as we're going along, we're reminded that they were under the rule of Rome, because right there is that fortress of King Herod. Now, as we come along on the bus, we see some big walls. This is really, modern Americans are shocked by what they see here, because as we approach Bethlehem, there's 30-foot-high concrete walls with barbed wire on the top. And we realize we're not going to just drive into this city. There's a checkpoint. It's like going into another country. It really is. Now, Israel built that wall a while ago because of terrorism, and they built it to stop that flow of terrorists coming into Israel, and it worked. Pretty much it worked because you don't see that happening anymore. But we have to pull around, and you see big high towers where there's soldiers up in there. But we come through a checkpoint, and there's these young soldiers, and they want to know where we are, and you hear the word Amerikaim. That's the Hebrew word for Americans. Now, we don't have to show our passports or anything yet, but when we leave Bethlehem, they're going to want to get on our bus, and we're going to have to show them all our passports to make sure that we're all really Americans leaving Bethlehem, coming back. So when we drive through that, sometimes there's a line, but we go through that big, massive gate and through these huge concrete walls, and then we say, "Welcome to Bethlehem." Now it's like a different country over there. It's just congested with people. There's always a big line of buses and taxis trying to get out of Bethlehem into Israel. And so people are banging on the windows of the bus trying to sell us things, as we drive through. And now we're in the city, and we see the people from Bethlehem. We've left Israel, the Jewish part. So before, it's almost all Jewish. Now, as soon as we cross that gate, that checkpoint into Bethlehem, now it's all Arabs. These are all Palestinians. Probably 30% of them are Christians and 70% are Muslims. And the Christian population is dwindling. So we drive through the streets, and we come to a very crowded street, and we pull our bus off to the side. We're not supposed to, but we have special privileges because of some friends we have there in Bethlehem. And we pull off, and all of us get off the bus, and immediately we're surrounded by vendors who want to sell us things, who want to tell us that you got to buy this and that. Well, we wander our way through. There's a little door that we go through into the church of Bethlehem. And it's a little door. You could see where there was 3 different sized doors, but now we go through, you have to stoop through it. Even the shortest person in our group has to stoop almost onto their knees to get in. And the reason they did that is because the Muslims are riding their horses into the Church of Nativity and parking their horses in there. So the Christians said, well, if that's the way you want to do it, we're going to build a small door. Now you can't bring your horses anymore. But it's also appropriate because you have to kneel before you come in. Now there's usually about an hour or 2 hour line that we have to wait in, but that gives gives us time to explain everything with our earphones on that everybody has. And we talk about the Bethlehem and all this. And then we go down these steep steps, and there it is. There is the place. It's a 14-pointed star, marks the place of Jesus's birth. And people have tears in their eyes by this time, and they're shaking. And we start to sing, "Oh, Holy Night," or little town of Bethlehem. And there's crowds down there. There's a lot of nationalities, crowds pushing and shoving, and I'm defending my people and helping. But we all get a chance to touch the place where Jesus was born. Then we go up to the top, and then there's the Church of Catherine of Siena, where that's the Roman Catholic Church, and we pray the rosary there.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray is heard live every Monday on the Guadalupe Radio Network program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.